Always got to be something, doesn't it? So due to biological difficulties, not technical difficulties, I had to stop my stream of my Road to 500, my top 500 movies of all time. I was going to do 50 to 1, and then I got to 30, so it was 50 to 30, and then I had to stop the stream because of biological difficulties, a massive issue, which I don't need to talk about right now, but needless to say, I had to stop it because if I didn't, I was going to do something to myself I didn't want to do to myself. Anyway, so sorry about that. And it's also a way to get you to watch more content as well. Watch it again. So this is the part 2 of the epilogue, which will be hopefully when I we'll go down without any breaks. This is going to be movies 29 to 1, my favorite movies of all time that I like. Again, for those who might not have seen the previous ones, this is just my list. I do a show every Saturday called Dylan Knows. The 500th episode was last week, and to celebrate the 500th episode, I was going to do 5 episodes of my countdown of my 500 favorite movies of all time. But due to a lot of different things, I wasn't able to get it done in time, and I had to split my 100 to 1 episode into 2 episodes, to 100 to 51, and then 50 to 1. But then because of the biological difficulties, it was really 50 to 30, and now we're doing 29 to 1. I should not stop here. The first one was about an hour and 15 minutes long. It's probably about the same here as well. So get into the big ones. These are the top movies of mine. Again, just real quick, the rules are this is my list, not your list. These are films that I like that you may like, but you might not like them as much as I do, and you might have had them at a different location in your list. You might think I'm crazy for having certain movies at certain heights, or that the wrong movie should have been in a different slot, so on and so forth, but that's your opinion. You make your own list and how you would do it, but this is my list. This is how I do it. It's a fluid list. This isn't the end-all, be-all for my list. I have not seen every movie. There are movies that have not been released yet. There are movies I have not even seen yet that have been out for a while. And so eventually on my travels, I hope to see some of these movies, and some of them might affect me in a way that I would have to redo a 500 list again with these other movies coming in here. These movies come from movies that came out to the theaters, direct to DVD, streaming, all that aspects of well. These are all movies I have seen. As I said, there are lots of movies that I have not seen, so they're not on this list. So if there's a movie that is considered one of the greatest movies of all time, and it's not on this list, it's because I probably haven't seen it. Again, a lot of my movies, probably 97, 98% of my list are movies from the 1970s to present day. There's 3 or 4 that are from before then. It's just that I've never been a huge fan of the older movies. I know there are probably a lot of big fans out there, and there are probably a lot of really good older movies as well. I prefer these more recent movies as well, so that's why these are the ones that are my main list. So all these movies on here are all movies that as I said, all movie theaters with the exception of 1 or 2 in this list that are from streaming, and actually there's only 1 that's from streaming. All the others are ones that have hit the movie theaters. So that is the list. Those are the rules. And I apologize again for having to cut out early, but I wasn't going to cause myself any more distress than already is. I figured I may as well just stop the stream and then start over again from where I left off. So number 30, as I just talked about, was Home Alone. So now number 29 is Back to the Future 3. The Back to the Future series is one of my favorite series. Robert Zemeckis is one of my favorite directors. In my opinion, the third one is the weakest of the 3, but it's still a really good movie. It's number 29 on my list, so of course it's still a really good movie. But it was almost as, Back to the Future 2 is completely different than the first movie, which is the way it's supposed to be, and it didn't get quite as good reviews, and it made good money, but it got a lot of, mediocre-ish reviews, which is absurd to me, which we'll talk about that in a little bit, though. So they decided, let's get it back to sort of a similar feel in Back to the Future 3, setting it in one location instead of multiple locations, and having a situation that deals with the characters and not other aspects as well. So Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Tom F. Wilson are the main characters in this. The third one finds the first part of the third one is really good because it answers the cliffhanger that the second one ended on, and details how Marty, trapped in 1955, meets up with 1955 Christopher Lloyd again. He just saw present 1985 Christopher Lloyd, Doc Brown, disappear from a lightning strike. Got a letter from him saying he's in 1885 as a blacksmith, but then Marty's still trapped in 1955 without a time machine. Doc has fixed the time machine and has sent a letter to Marty saying this is where you go to find the time machine and how you use it and how you get back to the present day. And then when you get back to present day, destroy it, because I don't think time travel should be a game anymore. And I'm happy where I am in 1885. But during their research in 1955, they discover that Doc Brown, 1885, actually gets killed very soon after he sends the letter to Marty. So Marty decides that he's going to go back in time to save Doc Brown from getting killed. So now he has to go from 1955 to 1885 to save Doc Brown. And so we get to Hill Valley when it was just a Western outpost in California, and it's typical Old West sort of style. Buford Tannen, played by Tom F. Wilson, is the typical sort of mad dog, sort of shoot first, ask question later, sort of Old West sort of character. And you also get Mary Steenburgen in there, who falls in love with Doc Brown's Christopher Lloyd, and that's the main gist of the third movie, is focused more on Doc Brown's character, whereas the first movie focused more on Marty's character. The second one focused on both of them. The third one focuses on Doc Brown. So it kind of all works out in the end. But again, a very well directed film. Robert Zemeckis is an amazing director. It is probably it's up there as part of the top trilogies of all time. Again, in my top 5, probably number 2 behind Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, maybe number 3. So somewhere in there. But it is part of my top trilogies of all time. And Back to the Future number 3 is number 29. Oh, I forgot about this part of the trilogy as well. Number 28 is Before Sunrise, which is the movie that started the whole Before saga as well. Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy, directed by, I forget his name right now, Richard something or other. Anyway, it's a great romantic film. The first, as I said, of a trilogy. And the premise is college kid Ethan Hawke, who's out of college, wants to surprise his girlfriend who's on an Italian trip for school. And when he gets there, they hadn't been together for a while. Turns out that she really doesn't like him anymore, even though he saved all his money to come see her. So they kind of break up. And so he jumps on the Eurail because he's not ready to go back home yet, and just drives around Europe for a few weeks just to, get his mind clear and get himself prepped to head back to real life. And on his last leg of his journey, he runs into a beautiful French woman, Julie Delpy, who is also coming back from a visit to her grandmother's. And the two of them strike up a conversation, and they enjoy each other's company on the train. But then they get to, I always get this one screwed up. This is the big important part of the, what is the European country? It's where the psychologist is. Austria. It's in Austria. Let's see. Vienna. It's Vienna. That's right. Vienna. So they stop over in Vienna. And that is where Ethan Hawke is going to meet his airplane the next morning, but he doesn't have enough money to get a hotel room, so he's just going to wander around Vienna, and he's having a good time talking to Julie Delpy's character. So he figures, I have a proposition. Why don't you cut off the train with me, and we'll walk around Vienna, and then you can hop on the train, head back home to Paris tomorrow. Or if it turns out I'm some sort of psychopath, you can just run away from me, jump on the first train you see, and get out of here, and you'll be home free as well. And Julie Delpy, who's intrigued with him, also decides that she's going to stick around with him. So the two of them just walk around Vienna and talk. And that's the movie. And the two of them slowly begin to fall in love with each other. But it's a discussion-based film. I mean, that's all it is that it's beautiful scenery filmed in Vienna. and they just talk about different aspects of relationships and life and art and philosophy and religion, and they talk about their lives, about previous love interests, stuff like that. As they are slowly getting closer together, they start making out and looking at each other, and you can feel the sexual chemistry between them, and it's just an amazing dreamlike night for them. And then in the morning, they turn into pumpkins, as they say, because Ethan Hawke's got to board his airplane to go back to America, and Julie Delpy's got to hop on the train to go back to Paris. But it is a outstanding film, and it leaves it up in the air. They agree to meet back there in Vienna in 6 months, which the film is set in June, so it'd be in December. So they say, well, we'll meet here, and then we'll just go someplace else on the train. And they don't exchange phone numbers, and they don't want to ruin the magical evening that they had. So they leave, and that's the end of the movie. And that's Before Sunrise. And it spun off 2 more films I've already talked about: Before Midnight, which was the third one, which is my least favorite of them. And we'll talk about Before Sunset in a little bit. Just you wait. Number 27 is another in the best trilogy saga. This one is also the third one in the trilogy. It's still an excellent movie, and it won an insane amount of Oscars, but the majority feeling is that the reason why it won so many Oscars is because it was the culmination of this one big story that covered 3 movies, which are all connected. Yes, I'm talking about Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, the extended edition, not the original edition. None of the Lord of the Rings films that I get ready to talk about here in the next 26 some films are the regular editions, because the regular editions are okay. The extended editions are the best and the canon Lord of the Rings films that you need to watch. Return of the King's extended edition makes the film be about close to 3.5 hours long, which is one of the downfalls of it. And 2, it has just so much going on. It has to tie up so much stuff that it's sometimes hard to follow what's going on in some bits and pieces. But regardless, it's still number 27 on the list of my top 500 movies of all time, which is very impressive. It's still a very well done movie. Peter Jackson directed it. He and his wife wrote the screenplay, the adaptation of it. An amazing cast, which, Elijah Wood, Ian McKellen, Viggo Mortensen, Billy Boyd, the other guy, Aston, Sean Astin, and then I forget who the other, the one who was in Dominic Monaghan, as well as in that too, and Bloom, Orlando Bloom, and John Rhys Davies, and the guy who plays Gollum, I always forget the actor's name, is in there as well. And Liv Tyler is in it, and I forget the actors who play some of the other major roles in it, but it's lots of Carl Urban's in it too. Lots of different roles, lots of different people. Kate Blanchett, the guy who's Agent Smith, Hugo Weaving, as well. Just an outstanding cast, a phenomenal job by Peter Jackson, turning Lord of the Rings into one of the greatest trilogies of all time. And Return of the King, just because it is the last one and it's not my favorite, but it's still not a bad movie. Hell, as I said, won like 12 Oscars. The extended edition is number 27. Number 26, we come back around to another one of the trilogies. We get Back to the Future 2, number 26. Unlike a lot of other people, I enjoyed Back to the Future 2 because it is so different than Back to the Future. Back to the Future 3 is very similar to Back to the Future. Back to the Future 2 tried something different, and I like the fact that they did that. It has them going back from 1985 to 2015, where Marty's got to stop his son from making a mistake that could ruin his life. And then while he's in the future, he discovers a sports almanac, which has scores for all the sports games from 1900 to 2000 sort of in it. So Michael J. Fox decides that, hey, I think it'd be kind of cool if I take this back in time, make some bets, and make a ton of money. which is a bad take, but you got to maybe still remember he's still a teenage kid, even though he looks older than that. But still, he's a teenage kid, and that's what a teenage kid would do. And of course, Doc Brown doesn't like this idea, so they say they're going to have to burn the almanac. But before they can do that, they've had some issues where they have to do some stuff in the future, and then while they're doing their thing in the future, old Biff, played by Thomas F. Wilson, steals a DeLorean, goes back in time, and changes the past, or changes the present, rather, 1985. When they go back to 1985, it's not 1985 they know, and so they have to go back to 1955 to save the date. So you go from regular 1985 to the future 2015 to an alternate universe 1985 to back to 1955 where they just were, and this time Doc is with him, and he is there at the same time as Marty was from Back to the Future. So there's lots of coincidences where the two of them are in the same slot. They never see each other, but they are in the same area. And there's some phenomenal effects shots, including the scene where Marty's playing Johnny Be Good on the stage at the high school, and Marty from Back to the Future 2 is crawling up the catwalks to stop some bad guys from attacking Marty as he gets off stage. It's just a lot of it. It takes Zemeckis and Gale, who are the writers, and Zemeckis directed it also. They decided that they wanted to play with the time travel aspect a little bit. So they create alternate dimensions. They create sequences where they have the characters interacting with each other, kind of, but not really. Leah Thompson is the other main part of the Back to the Future squad as well. And James Tolkien is also. So you've got just the second one is just, I love the second one so much because it is so different, because it also plays with the time travel aspect of it. It makes the time travel be almost front and center, whereas Back to the Future is a wonderful film, which I'll talk about in a little bit. It's a little bit higher up on my list, obviously. But I'll talk about that a little bit, but it's because that is just an almost perfect story that you're trying to tell. But then the sequel, you need to up the ante a little bit, and they definitely do while playing around with the time travel aspect, which in turn, unfortunately, turned off a lot of people. So they went back to the old school stuff and Back to the Future Part 3. Though all three are great films and are still considered, as I said, in my top 5 greatest trilogies of all time. It might actually overtake Lord of the Rings a little bit. But there we go. It's Back to the Future 2 is number 26. All right, we're almost there. Top 25. So I'm at the halfway point. Believe it or not. I can't believe I'm at the halfway point now on this list, but here we go. 25 is probably a film that you've probably never heard of before. It's an underrated gem from 1993. Came out during the summer of 93, which was the summer of Jurassic Park, which means that this year it is celebrating its 30th anniversary. And that's something that I need to celebrate a little bit later on. 30th anniversary, 1993. And has a way pre Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. in it. It is the incredible supernatural comedy romance a little bit in there as well. Heart and Souls, directed by Ron Underwood, who did Tremors, Speechless, a bunch of other movies, City Slicker, stuff like that. Heart and Souls is one of my absolutely favorite romantic comedies because it's not quite a romantic comedy. Robert Downey Jr., Elizabeth Shue plays the female lead, who is Robert Downey Jr.'s girlfriend, who wants more of a commitment from Robert Downey Jr., but he's not ready to commit to her because he's being followed by 4 ghosts, played by Charles Grodin, Alfre Woodard, Keira Sedgwick, and Tom Sizemore. And the storyline behind how that happens is fast forward or go backwards in time to 1953, I guess. So about 40 years earlier, 30 or 40 years. It's like 53 or 63 is one of those two. I think it might have been 63 actually. And I think about probably, but you fast forward, back to the past and before Robert Downey Jr. was born. And we meet the 4 ghosts played by Charles Grodin, Alfre Woodard, Tom Sizemore, and Keira Sedgwick when they're alive, and we see that each of them have and their own issue they have to deal with. Keira Sedgwick is a waitress who just moved to the big city of San Francisco, which is where the movie takes place. away from the country, where her longtime boyfriend wants a commitment from her, but she just wants to sort of live her life a little bit. But he comes and visits her during her one of her shifts and declares his love for her, and she's not ready to commit to him, so he leaves her. But then she starts thinking about it a little bit. It's like, I just know I can't have that. I need to get him back, and we need to get together, get married, and I need to apologize, stuff like that. So she runs out to try to find him, but he's gone by this point. So she's going to try to figure out where he is. So she gets on a bus, who's driven by David Paymer, and is going to go try to find where he might be, go to his house or something like that. Or I guess he's staying in that California town also. I don't think it is San Francisco though, right? I think it is. Pretty sure it is. Anyway, so there's Kira Sedgwick's character. And then we have Tom Sizemore's character, who is a 2-bit criminal, who is seen casing the joint of a fancy house, ends up breaking into this person's house and steals a sheet of the upside down airplane stamps, which are worth a fortune. And we discover that the guy he's trying to steal it from is the guy that hired him to steal it originally, and he catches him stealing it back. And so they have a conversation. We discover that Tom Sizemore had stolen it from a young kid whose grandfather had given it to him as a present. He didn't care about how much it cost. It was something from his grandfather, and Tom Sizemore knew how much it was going to cost. So he tries to steal it back for the kid, but is pushed back by the guy he stole it for, and then he escapes before getting killed and runs to the kid and tells the kid that life's tough, sorry about that. And the kid runs away crying, and so Tom Sizemore feels guilty because he shouldn't have done that. So he hails the same bus that Kira Sedgwick's on, driven by David Paymer, and gets on that bus. Next up, we have Alfre Woodard, single mom, Black single mom, who is trying to raise 3 kids, twins and a boy. And she has to work the telephone operator line. They used to have to put the little plugs in there to connect phone calls. And she's working a night shift, and she's leaving her kids, who are like 10, 11 years old, by themselves. But she has a neighbor who's going to watch them and make sure that they're okay. But she's saying, I know I hate leaving you at night, but I have to do this to keep you, fed and housed and stuff like that. So she gets on the bus to go to work, driven by David Paymer, along with Kira Sedgwick and Tom Sizemore. Finally, we meet Charles Grodin's character, who is a opera singer, really good opera singer, but he's just deathly afraid of singing in public. So he's auditioning for the main opera group in San Francisco, or wherever I think it's San Francisco takes place, which is a very prestigious sort of thing, but he can't do it. He freezes, even though we hear him earlier when he's by himself. He's really, really good at it. So he freezes, and so he gets on the same bus, David Paymer, Kira Sedgwick, Tom Sizemore, Alfre Woodard. So then we meet his parents, a dad who's coming back from work and is out of breath. Like, hey, we're going to have a baby because his wife is like 9 months pregnant. She's having contractions. So he gets her into the car because she's getting ready to have the baby, and they're driving the car real fast. And so David Paymer's riding his bus, and he gets distracted and does not see the car with the parents in it. And then the bus, and he's able at the last minute to swerve without hitting that car, and ends up crashing the bus into a bridge and kills everyone on board, including himself. And while that's happening, the couple, the woman who's expecting, is going to deliver the baby in the car after he just barely, the dad just barely escapes getting hit by the bus. They've crashed, and she's getting ready to have the baby. So he helps deliver the baby. And the 4 ghosts of Alfre Woodard, Tom Sizemore, Charles Grodin, and Kira Sedgwick are connected to the young baby boy. And so we see as he's growing up, they become like his surrogate family, his imaginary friends. He can see them, and they talk to him, and they interact with him. And as you see them as he's growing up, and he talks to them more, and he loves them and absolutely adores them. They're his favorite people in the world, and they love him too. But they cannot leave him. So they couldn't fly away from him. They have to stay within his vicinity. And then they discover that him believing in them and them doing things like the con man is convincing him to go place bets on a horse race, and also doing other stuff as well. And so the parents decide that maybe, he's psychotic or something like that. He has these imaginary friends, and so the imaginary friends hear this, like, we can't let this ruin this kid's life, so they disappear on him, which absolutely messes him up. So then we fast forward to present day 93 as Robert Downey Jr. The ghosts are still there, but he can no longer see them, but they can still see him, and they're still hanging around there, and they are starting to get tired of each other. They've been together for 30 plus years and seen everything that he's done. Robert Downey Jr. is now this hard working like lawyer who goes after people who are defaulting on their loans from the banks, and he's going to shut them down, or they owe him money. He's going to try to force them to pay him the money and stuff like that, or they're going to get sued or go to jail or whatever. Kurtwood Smith is one of the characters that Downey Jr. goes after. Anyway, he's not the nicest person in the world. He's kind of an asshole, because what happened is losing his 4 ghost friends has turned him into sort of a cynical sort of a-hole. And eventually he's convinced himself that he imagined the whole thing. So now he doesn't even think about them, but they're still there hanging around. So one day he's meeting his girlfriend, Elizabeth Shue, played by Elizabeth Shue, who wants a commitment from him. And they're having lunch at this conservatory, and the ghosts are with him. And then Tom Sizemore character sees a ghostly bus show up, driven by David Paymer, who was the one that killed them in the first place. His penance is for killing them is he's picking up souls to give to new lives. Basically, ghosts hang around until they're needed, and then when new life is born, those souls of the ghosts who are hanging around get put into the new body. So it's kind of a reincarnation sort of thing going on. But because they were never told that was the reason why they were hanging around, they just thought that they were just hanging around there. They're a little concerned, because they were supposed to be able to use their vessel to do their last wishes, in the case of Charles Grodin, his last wish would be to sing in front of public. Kira Sedgwick was to find her boyfriend and tell him that she did love him and wanted to be with him, but circumstances changed on that. To find out what happened to Alfred Woodard's kids, and to help Tom Sizemore get the stamps back. But they didn't know that was what they could use them for, so they convinced the bus driver, because he's the one that killed them, to let them try to do this now before they're taken, even though they need to be taken now. So Paymer is able to stall God a little bit while they go and try to solve their problems. And then they have to come back to life in front of Robert Downey Jr. And eventually they do. So then Robert Downey Jr. remembers them and thinks he's going crazy again. But then he learns the truth about it. And then they end up, forcing him to do their bidding for him and do all this stuff. So that's what Heart and Souls is basically about. But it is such a good movie. Robert Downey Jr. is so good. You even get a lot of physical comedy from him. He's so good in this because he has to, when Alfred Woodard, who's a black woman, enters his body, he has to act like her. And when Charles Grodin enters his body, he's got to sing and act like him. And Robert Downey Jr. can sing also, so you get that. When Tom Sizemore comes in, he's got to act like Tom Sizemore. It's so great, and Robert Downey Jr. is able to kill it because he's such a good actor. Now, 93 was right around the time that he was still undergoing a lot of his drug and alcohol issues. So he was still in a lot of trouble with that. But this movie was so good. But it was overshadowed by another film, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, Jurassic Park. And I saw this movie actually as a part. I saw Jurassic Park 4 times. And I saw this movie. One of those 4 times was, they used to do this back in the 90s. Same thing with Independence Day. They did the same thing with that when I saw the movie Phenomenon. They used to show a movie that they were excited about. They didn't think was going to get a big audience. They were going to show that first. And then as a thank you for watching that film, your ticket would pay for an additional screening of Jurassic Park. So, you would go in for a Heart and Souls double feature. So you watch Heart and Souls first. And then after Heart and Souls is over, you would stay in the movie theater. Your ticket gave you 2 films, and then they would play Jurassic Park right after it. So you would be able to do that. Same thing as I said with Independence Day. They showed the movie. In this case, was Phenomenon. John Travolta it's not in my list because it's okay, but it's not great. plays just a regular type guy who sees a light in the sky, and then the next morning gets miraculous powers, and that's really about it. And that's the movie. So they showed that first, and then they showed Independence Day after it as a way to thank you for coming, and maybe if you like the movie, to spread the word to your friends and family. Hey, Heart and Soul is a good film. Phenomenon is a good film. I just saw it the other day. Why don't you go see it when it's released in theaters? So that's what Heart and Souls is. I love this movie so much, and I just realized that it's a 30th anniversary film this year. So I'm going to have to watch it again. I'm going to try to get as many people as I can to watch it. It is a underrated film that really needs to be seen. It needs to be thrown up there as one of the best romantic comedies out there. It's not really a romantic comedy, but it's a great comedy about loss and release and stuff like that. And it is so good. And Robert Downey Jr. is so good in this movie as well. So Heart and Soul is number 25. Number 24 is another great film that is not talked about as much. And this is a 93, I think. It'd be 93, 92 also. There are some good movies there. I don't think it was any time before that. Maybe not. It's Dave. Ivan Reitman directed it. Kevin Kline, Sigourney Weaver, Kevin Dunn, who else? Ben Kingsley. Trying to think of who else. And I can't think of the main bad guy. I see him in my face all the time, but I can't think of the main guy. I gotta get, because can't talk about this movie without talking about the main bad guy, because Dave is such a great movie, and because Ivan Reitman is also he's the guy who directed Ghostbusters and Stripes and Twins and Frank Langella. Frank Langella's a bad guy. Charles Grodin's in it. Laura Linney, Ving Rhames, Bonnie Hunt, Kevin Dunn, as I said, Faith Prince, Ben Stein, Stephen Root. That's right, he's in it real quick. Bonnie Bartlett, Anna Devari Smith. And then there's tons of cameos because Ivan Reitman is such a well-loved filmmaker, and it was a film set in Washington, D.C. I'll talk about in a second. But you get Arnold Schwarzenegger, who you just worked with Twins and Kindergarten Cop. You get Oliver Stone. You've got Jay Leno. You've got Larry King. You've got Chris Matthews. You've got Helen Thomas. You get Tip O'Neill makes an appearance in it as well, who was at the time Speaker. Well, he wasn't at the time, but he had just retired as Speaker of the House. And just a wide variety of just cameos, and it's set in Washington, D.C. So it's filmed mostly in Washington, D.C. And I have a story about this one as well, but I'm going to just really talk about this for a little bit, because I love this movie so much. And I need to see, I think if it was 93, I'm going to absolutely scream my head off. Let's see, what year did it come out? 1993, it was. 1993 was an awesome year for film. Yeah, that's awesome. So it was 93. Let's talk about Dave. Dave is a old school Mr. Smith Goes to Washington sort of political fairy tale. Let's just say that, because we all know, particularly now in 2023, how miserable politics and Congress and all that bullshit that's happening in Washington right now, how bad it is now. And here we are 30 years earlier, back when things were still pretty decent. We were in the middle. We just started Clinton as president, and the world was starting to change. Communism was falling, and things were looking brighter. It was before 9/11. It was before Donald Trump. It was before all this bullshit with the conservatives and the Tea Party and all these assholes that are out there now that are destroying our country, and the return of fascism and all that bullshit. This was it's a political fairy tale filmed entirely in Washington, with some bits filmed here in Baltimore and Virginia and other aspects as well. And the general premise is Dave is a guy who finds people jobs. He runs a not very successful job finding place where he is loves the people he works with and tries his damnedest to try to get these people jobs, but it's really hard for him to do this because he's so attached to these people and he doesn't have a lot of experience and a lot of friends that he can dip into, and and everyone's counting on him. And he's got to do it right. He's a good guy. He's a nice guy, and he gets a visit from the Secret Service. Ving Rhames is the main Secret Service guy in this case. And because one of the things that Dave does also is a side, what is it? The side, that's not side job, but it's a side, whatever, but it's a side job that he does. He runs this finding jobs things, but he also has an uncanny ability. Well, not ability, it's just he is one of the people that looks amazingly like the current president of the United States. So what he does is he does a side hustle where he is paid by businesses and stuff like that to pretend to be the president for commercials or for live appearances, whatever, because he's got the president's motions down. He looks like him. And he's got his motions, but you can tell it's not quite the president, but it's someone that looks exactly like him. But it's a way for these smaller businesses to spread the word about their small businesses, to have someone that looks like the president saying, this is the only place I buy cars, or this is the only food that I eat. And it's Dave portraying the president. And so the Secret Service, when they see these ads pop up that the president's going to be at this place, whatever, they're going to go check it out. It's like that president's not going to be there. So they want to see what's going on with that. So they've caught his act a few times, but in secret, nobody knows it's him. So they decide that we're going to need him for something, because apparently there is something that happens. Now, this is just in the movies. I don't know if this actually happens in real life or not, but in the movie, they say there are certain instances where the president uses a double so that if there's any threat of danger or whatever, someone, says they want to kill the president or whatever, they don't want to put the president in too much danger. So they put someone in his place who looks like him enough just to, let him walk from one place to another, so that if a assassin is waiting, they won't actually get the real president. And the Secret Service are still going to watch him, so they'll still predict him like he's the president. So there's really not a lot of, but they want to sort of take the heat off of the main president while he's got other things to do. And so there's an event coming up where they need a fake president to come and just walk from the stairway to the car, because the president's got other plans, and we'll talk about those in a second. And so Dave absolutely says he'll do it, because it's the president. He's actually going to meet the president, and he's going to pretend to be the president. He's going to take his shtick that he does to make money on the side and actually do it in real life. And so he's kind of jazzed about that. So eventually they take him to the event, which is at this hotel where the president is currently doing a speech in front of his loners and people who give him money and stuff like that. And meanwhile, they're getting Dave prepped in the hotel room, getting the hair right, cut and colored, and glasses on and right suit, and they teach him how to do certain movements that Dave already knows pretty much how to do, but they want to make sure that he knows how to do some stuff. And then the real president comes in, who's also played by Kevin Kline's character. And this president is a pompous asshole shithead who's cheating on his wife, the first lady, played by Sigourney Weaver, with Laura Linney's secretary or whatever. And that's the whole point of this, is that the president is going to stay in the hotel and have a sexual encounter with his mistress. But he doesn't want his wife to know, and and let anybody else know that he's cheating on his wife, because no one knows he's cheating on his wife except for Secret Service and the members of his staff. So, Dave doesn't know this. He just thinks that there's some serious situation going on, and that's why they need him. But the president is actually fucking a secretary, his mistress. And so Dave does a fantastic job. He's excited. He sees everyone cheering for him because they think he's the president, and he's doing the motions and the hand thing, and he's loving it. And it keeps building up. He's so excited. He's not supposed to talk. He turns around and just says, "God bless you. God bless America." And everybody loves that. And so the Secret Service takes him away, and they drive off. And then we cut back to the actual president, who's in the middle of fornicating with his secretary, and in the middle of a sexual thrust, he has a stroke and collapses on her. So she calls the Secret Service and his and some of his members of his cabinet to come and cover this up. The members of the cabinet, Frank Langella, Kevin Dunn, who are the bad guys of the movie, they come to this and they got to figure out how are they going to pass this off. The president is in a coma right now, and the vice president is in Africa on a goodwill tour, and they say we have to call the vice president because the president is incapacitated. But Frank Langella's Secretary of Defense, or one of his members of his cabinet or whatever, says, no, this is my time, because he has a plan that he wants to take over the presidency. He was a senator at one time and now works in this cabinet. And so he comes up with a plan to become president of the United States. And he convinces Kevin Dunn to help him with the plan. So basically what they're going to do is they're going to go into the news, say that the president had a stroke, but not a serious one, and he's resting in the White House. But the real president, as we know, is in a coma. So they decide that they're going to, because Dave did such a good job, they're going to grab Dave and have him come back to the White House and come up with some bullshit story that the president is in is in bad shape, but they want to make sure that the country and the world knows that the president is still in charge. So that's why Dave is going to become the president. Now, of course, Dave knows the Constitution. Like, well, why aren't you calling the vice president? And they're like, well, the vice president is insane. He's crazy. And Dave, is naive. He's like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. So yeah, I'll help you. That's fine. Sounds like we can't have a crazy person running stuff. And then so they start their plan in motion. So basically what's going to happen is, so they'll teach Dave how to be the president, because he's already doing a pretty good job of it, but they'll give him more information to really bring him up to speed. And they only used to be president for a few weeks until they get their second part of their plan in motion. Now, Frank Langella's character and the president were involved in a financial conspiracy scandal thing, which has just started to come to light a little bit, but nothing is said certain that they're involved with it. So they want to head that off the pass. They decide they're going to take that's would implicate all of them and throw it on the vice president to make him be the one that was the criminal the whole time. That way they will, and again, Dave being naive will believe it, and the American public being naive will believe it also. So they'll convince Dave to fire the vice president and make Bob Alexander the vice president, his head of staff or whatever, to become the vice president, which makes sense because Bob Alexander is like, they know that he's sort of like the right-hand man of the president. And then when the president has a second stroke, which is a whole lot worse, they will then make Bob Alexander, who's the vice president, become president. And then they'll move Dave out of there and pay him off or whatever, and he'll go live his life. And then they'll wheel out the real president, who's in the coma, who eventually is probably going to die because I don't think he's going to survive, but he's still in a coma. And Bob Alexander be president. It seems perfect, and it's just a matter of making sure that Dave can pull it off. And Dave pulls it off. He actually becomes hugely more popular than expected, and causes some, because he's a good guy, and they everyone sees this change him and think that the stroke that he had changed his mind. But remember, the real president was having an affair, and the first lady kind of knows about it, so she's mad at him, not knowing that it's Dave. But eventually she discovers that that's not really her husband, that it's someone else. So they have to, Dave has to explain himself to her, and then she is convinced by Dave to play along with it as well, because he wants to help change the world, because he wants to find people jobs, and he does all kinds of good stuff, and he's going against the stuff that Bob Alexander is for. So Bob's getting a little peeved and upset because this guy is running off script from them because he's doing his own thing, but Bob can't come right out and do anything, and because he needs Dave to do all this for him to become president, and it doesn't quite work out. So that's kind of the premise of it, how Dave is going to solve this and how he's going to fight off Bob Alexander. But it is such an amazing political comedy, a fairy tale. It's Kevin Kline is outstanding in his dual role. Sigourney Weaver is great as she always is. Frank Langella is perfectly evil as the villain. Kevin Dunn as the guy who's conflicted is great. The cast in general, the sets, it's America, and again, it'll probably be in my 4th of July list that I talked about in my last episode, where I'm thinking of doing a conversation with myself episode where I'm gonna do movies that are great for Independence Day, and Dave is one of those fantastic movies. One last story before I move on to the next one. I could have been in Dave, and I'm still kind of pissed about it. But there's a sequence filmed at Camden Yards. So remember, this movie came out in '93. Camden Yards, which is where the Baltimore Orioles, my baseball team, play. They opened their stadium in 1992 at Camden Yards. So it was still only a year old. Camden Yards is probably the best stadium in the United States, and it is the grandfather of all these other new stadiums that have popped up over the last 30 years. They've emulated what they've done at Camden Yards and turned their stadiums into similar things. So, you're going to see a lot of stadiums that everybody says are gorgeous and everything, but the great grandfather is Camden Yards. So there's a sequence where Dave, as the president, is throwing the first ball out at Memorial Stadium or at Camden Yards because it's the closest stadium to Washington, D.C. that has a baseball team because the Nationals weren't there yet. And so he goes Camden. As I say, Camden Yards is only a year old at this time. And my dad and I and my sister had tickets to the game that they were going to film the sequence. They were going to film it at the beginning of a game. So basically the first pitch ceremonies that they always do at the baseball games, it was going to be filmed. It was going to be Dave as the president in this movie, Dave, and Ivan Reitman was there, and they were telling the crowd, this is what this is what's going on, this is when the movie's coming out, something like that. So the fans, they just react like this is a real baseball game, and they actually threw to the Orioles catcher at the time, Jeff Tackett. And you get to see his face, and he's like impressed by the pitch. It's kind of funny, but he actually has a role in the film and gets his name in the credits also, which is great. And so I forget the reason why, but my dad and my sister and me end up not being able to go to the game because there was something we had to do. I forget what it was, but at the time my sister was engaged to my brother-in-law, and they were going to get married in November of '93. This came out in like June or July or whatever. So this is 30th anniversary also. Holy shit. So we gave him the tickets to the game, and he took some of his buddies that he worked with at the FBI. And so you don't actually see him, but he was in the stadium. He was one of the people cheering when the first pitch was thrown in Dave. So that's kind of a neat little story. So Dave's number 24. It was really hard putting it that high up. There's 23 other movies I think I like a little bit better, but I think if I redid it and I thought about it a little bit more, I would probably move Dave and Heart and Souls up probably a little bit closer. But it's hard because all these films coming up, particularly the next one, are hard to get past also. The next one is another, as I said, Zemeckis is all over the place. So far we've had, and from 32 down, I've had two Zemeckis films. I've got one more Zemeckis film, I think, on my list here. But that's just in the top 32 right now. Actually, top 30, to be honest. This is Zemeckis. This is Who Framed Roger Rabbit, number 23. This is a combination of animation and live action. Had never really been done before. They used to do it like in the 60s all the time, but it looked really kind of fake. This with the newfound special effects and stuff like that. This is in the late 80s. I think it's 89 actually is when this came out, or 88. I think it was 88 because 89 was when, no, it might have been 87 somewhere, but it's up there. Anyway, but it's the first ever animated and live action film which the animated characters interact realistically with live action actors. The main live action actors in this are Bob Hoskins and Christopher Lloyd, who are Christopher Lloyd's the bad guy and Bob Hoskins is the hero of the movie. And the premises takes place in 1930s. Again, probably could set this in the same frame as The Shadow, Rocketeer and all that. 1930s where, cartoons were king. And they had a town called Toontown where all the cartoons lived, which was right on the outskirts of Hollywood. And Bob Hoskins' character was a former police officer who he and his brother used to have the patrol of Toontown. They were human cops to make sure that there was no crime in Toontown. They had a blast. They loved Toontown. But one day they were pursuing a criminal who had stolen money from a cartoon bank. And they had to catch him because he committed a robbery. And the cartoon criminal got the jump on them and dropped a piano on top of Bob Hoskins' brother. Now, with animation, it wouldn't have affected the cartoons, but real life, a piano falling on somebody is going to kill them. So it killed Bob Hoskins' brother, who was his partner. The cartoon criminal got away, and Bob Hoskins became a alcoholic, got kicked off of the police squad, and ended up becoming a private investigator. And so he started doing, he needed to make money for his alcohol issue that he had. So he would take sleazy jobs like private eye type jobs, or he would take photographs of people and that were used for blackmail and stuff like that for, studio execs who wanted to keep their actors and their cartoon actors in check. They would send Bob Hoskins to get blackmail pictures of them and keep them in check. So he wasn't a well-liked person after that. But before that, he was known as one of the best pro cartoon people, helped a lot of them survive. You see a whole list of all the newspapers headlines that he was part of. He helped Goofy with spy charges. He stopped people charged Goofy with spying, and he helped them discover that he didn't and stuff like that. So he helped all these cartoons solve crime, stuff like that. So one day he gets a job where he has to take photographs of Roger Rabbit's wife, who is the gorgeous Jessica Rabbit, voiced by Kathleen Turner. And she's a gorgeous, specimen in cartoon format. And Roger is a rabbit, and he's like a Bugs Bunny type. And he is having issues focusing on the cartoons he's making. So the head of the film company that makes the cartoons is a little anxious, and they want to get the rabbit under control. So they hire Bob Hoskins to take the photos of knowing that the wife is having an affair with someone, and get the rabbit under control. And this sends, once he gets them done, and they show Roger, it takes Roger on a jealous thing, and he runs out on them. So Bob Hoskins goes back to his private eye place, gets drunk, passes out. He's woken in the morning by a police officer who was an old buddy of his from the police force, who says, "You need the money so much, why don't you just ask me?" And what he's talking about is like Marvin Acme, who's the head of the cartoon factory, who was having the affair with Roger's wife, was found dead, and they believe that Roger was the one that killed him. And it was because of the pictures they showed that Roger killed this human. So now, of course, there's guilt on Bob Hoskins. So now the police officer brings him in to help him try to solve the case, because it was basically kind of his fault. And they run into something Doom, I forget his name, who was played by Christopher Lloyd, who is the bad guy of the film. And they run into him, and so Eddie doesn't really think much about Bob Hoskins' character. Eddie doesn't think much about it, so he goes back to his office and discovers that Roger is hiding out there, because Roger remembers him from helping all these cartoon people. He said, "I didn't kill anybody. I'm being framed. Can you help me out?" And Hoskins doesn't want anything to do with cartoons, because cartoon killed his killed his brother, excuse me. But he gets involved in the case when Judge Doom thinks that he's withholding evidence, stuff like that. So he becomes embroiled in the case, becomes a wanted criminal by helping Roger out. So he's got to help try to prove that Roger did not kill Marvin Acme, and who actually did, because they also made him look like a fool also. And that's where we get into sort of this 1930s film noir sort of thing. It's perfect. It's great. The animation, you get classic, you get Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse working together in a sequence. You've got Donald Duck and Daffy Duck doing a sequence together. So you have Warner Brothers cartoons interacting with Disney cartoons, and independent cartoons like a Woody Woodpecker, so like that, showing up as well. And just it's hard to describe how good this movie is. And it's just the animation, live action conglomeration is so perfect and so great at it. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is number 23. 22 is a classic film from the 1980s. Is one of my wife's favorite, one of her favorite movies of all time. And honestly, it's number 22 because it's one of my favorite movies as well. Real Genius. Val Kilmer is the main. It's really one of the main actor, as well as the guy from Die Hard. Who always plays the asshole, and the guy who's in Ghostbusters also, who plays Peck. I can't think of his name right now. William Atherton. William Atherton is in it as well. And Real Genius is such an amazing film. Val Kilmer, early in his career, seemed like he was enjoying himself so much. I mean, the way his career in the 80s, he seemed to be enjoying himself making films. And somewhere in the 90s, early 90s, he started becoming a little bit too serious when it came to a lot of the roles that he did. And then 2000, he just sort of kind of disappeared for a while. And then he got the throat cancer or whatever. He can't talk now. And he's still a good actor. He popped up in a few movies during that time period, showed how good of an actor he actually was. And he seemed to be having a little bit more fun with it. And then to bring him into one of the best scenes from what I've heard. I haven't seen the movie yet, but Top Gun Maverick, one of the best scenes in that is the interaction between him and Tom Cruise's character, harkening back to the original Top Gun movie. But before Top Gun, there was Top Secret, which I've already talked about. And there was this movie, Real Genius, where Val Kilmer was absolutely having a blast making this film. You could just tell he was having the time of his life making this film. And it's about a college where there's geniuses on ice, as you say. No, they're just geniuses who are working on a laser. This is 1985, so you can realize the laser technology really wasn't as intense at this point. It wasn't as good as it was, as it is now. But they're working on lasers right now, and he is Val Kilmer's a senior in college now. He was a brilliant mind that about halfway through his school career realized that he didn't need to push himself as much as he did the first 2 years of schooling, where he was doing nothing but schoolwork. And so he started becoming, more human and enjoying life a little bit more, joking around, going after women. And he still worked and he's still smart, but he just didn't want to make this class, this building this laser, this that makes school his, the main part of his life that was taking over his entire life. And that upset his professor, William Atherton, who brought him in at a young age, but he was still working at it, so it was okay. But he has a team assembled, still building it. So William Atherton brings in another young kid who's smarter than Val Kilmer's character. And this kid was as like a junior in high school or whatever. And so he skipped him and brought him into college to work on this. And he is rooming with Val Kilmer's character because Val Kilmer starts noticing that this kid is becoming a lot like him when he was young. He's doing everything, just spending all this time on schoolwork, not doing anything about, having fun or having living a life or whatever. And he's able to eventually bring out that side to him. And it sort of, again, disturbs the professor, but it's also this building of this laser is not for a good purpose. It's for a nefarious purpose. And William Atherton, who always plays a good bad guy, and he is the bad guy in this, but there is aspects of it. There are parts of this performance, and this is probably William Atherton's probably his best role that he's ever done because it's got layers. Yes, he is the main bad guy. Yes, he is an asshole, but there's also an underlying layer right there that you can actually see that he actually does like these kids. An evil bad guy would be, he's just using these kids for their brains and doesn't care anything else about them. And that's kind of true, but there are certain times where you can just see a certain look he gives or a phrase or something like that, where you can tell that he actually really likes these kids, but he's being pressured to do something that he thinks might be impossible, and that could be dangerous. But he's still an asshole. It's just when he's like particularly when he really goes after Val Kilmer's character because he's not doing anything. He's not showing up. He's just blowing off work, even though he's graduating. He doesn't need to do anything. He can pass everything. He can graduate. It's no problem. And so he's in that senior mode. But William Atherton's like, no, I still hold your fate in my hand. I could fail your ass. and make sure that nobody else, goes against me, and you're going to fail. You're going to fail out of college and all this stuff. He threatens him, and Val Kilmer walks away, and just the look on his face after he says that is like, oh my God, I did not want to say that or do that. He was upset and angry that it had to come to that, but he had to do it. So William Afton has a nice layer. He's still an asshole. There's plenty of asshole on him. He's still a bad guy on there, but there's a layer. There's a layer in there where you actually see that you might feel a little bit like he's not entirely all evil in the movie. And he does actually is concerned with his staff and his students and stuff like that. Real Genius is amazing. It's very quotable. Great chemistry between all the characters, and Val Kilmer's just having the time of his life in it. It's a lot of fun, and it's one of the first movies to focus on brainy people being normal and not, like Revenge of the Nerds, where, the nerds are so nerdy, but, they end up, on top. These guys are kind of nerdy-ish also, but they're kind of already on top. They're not being picked on by jocks, and they're not being, treated differently. They're just normal students. I did finish it. Holy cow. So Real Genius is number 22. 21 is a movie that I did not expect I was going to like as much as I did. And it is up there on the scale of rewatchability. That's why it's this high up. It's a recent film that came out a couple years ago that I did not watch until last year during the week when my wife was and kids were at scout camp. I took the week off of work and just wanted to sit there and watch movies I hadn't seen before. And there are actually 2 movies on this list that I watched during this week that are this high up because I enjoyed it so much. The first one is Ghostbusters Afterlife. The third in the Ghostbusters, if you want. You have the original Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters 2 is really not mentioned that much in this movie, but the original Ghostbusters really is. And you have Ghostbusters Afterlife, and it focuses on a whole new cast. It's a let me get the cast list on this one because this one is a really good movie, and I want to give them the proper credit because I love this movie so much, and it is so watchable, rewatchable. Ghostbusters Afterlife cast. There it is. So the main character is McKenna Grace, who is a young actress whose claim to fame is that she plays the younger version of a different bunch. She's played the younger version of Brie Larson and Captain Marvel, and of Margot Robbie and I, Tanya. And she was also in The House on Haunted Hill, or The Haunting of Hill House, I should say, as the younger version of one of the main characters who's an adult at that time. And she does it all the time. But now she's basically playing a completely different character, her own character. She's not the younger version of somebody, but she's McKenna Grace is the main star of this. Finn Wolfhard plays her brother. The guy from Stranger Things plays her older brother. And their mother is played by Carrie Coon, and her husband left her and the kids, and so she's been trying to raise them, but she doesn't make a lot of money, so they are in a shitty apartment, and McKenna Grace's Phoebe is extraordinarily smart, and Finn Wolfhard is Finn Wolfhard in this movie, really, for the most part. The typical sort of teenager. But Carrie Coon eventually discovers that she is being evicted from her apartment. But she also learns that her father, who she never knew, has died and has left his piece of land out in Oklahoma to them. So she takes her 2 kids to the house, ostensibly just for the summer, to clean it up, sell stuff, make money, and then try to make their way back to New York and find a place again and return to their life. But then because she was evicted and she doesn't have a job anymore because she has to spend the whole summer doing this, they end up, because she owns the house now due to her father leaving it to her in her will, she ends up moving their kids there for good. So they're going to live there. So they're not happy about that right away. But soon they discover some certain things. Finn Wolfhard goes to a drive-in sort of restaurant where he meets Celeste O'Connor's Lucky, where he falls in love with her, and he ends up getting a job working at that burger joint. Meanwhile, McKenna, this is during the summer, so school's out of session, but McKenna, who's a really smart girl, is sent to school like a summer school sort of thing, babysitting sort of thing, so that her mom can clean up the house. And the teacher who's teaching it is played by Paul Rudd, who is not on this list, surprisingly. Where is Paul Rudd? Why isn't he up here? Paul Rudd's not on here. That's funny. Paul Rudd plays the teacher who is the one who is teaching this summer school sort of. Why isn't he on the list? That's driving me crazy. That's crazy. He's not on the cast list here, but he is in the movie. He absolutely is in the movie. So Paul Rudd plays the teacher who is teaching this summer school, and he ends up flirting with Carrie Coon's Callie, the mom of McKenna and Finn's characters, Trevor and Phoebe. So she's finding someone, and Finn is enamored with someone, and McKenna, who's kind of a not outgoing, but a sort of internal, whatever. She's really, really smart. She makes a friend also in the legendary podcast played by Logan Kim, who is a guy who has a podcast, and he's such a great, fun thing. Anyway, they discover there's some strange earthquakes that are going on, and Paul Rudd's character is interested in that sort of thing. And so they start hanging out with him and find out that there's some weird stuff going on in Oklahoma. So later that night, Phoebe goes back to her home and discovers an old school device that looks like something from the original Ghostbusters movie. Whenever spirits are around, it lights up, and it starts lighting up, and then things start happening, and there's a ghost in the house. And McKenna's not freaked out by it, and eventually she discovers that the ghost is her grandfather, and that her grandfather is one Egon Spengler, played by Harold Ramis from Ghostbusters. Now, Harold Ramis had passed away by this time, and this film is a love letter to Harold Ramis in this. So McKenna, Grace's character Phoebe, is actually the granddaughter of Egon Spengler. Carrie Coon's Callie is the daughter of Egon Spengler. Trevor, Finn Wolfhard, is the grandson of Egon Spengler. So they discover that he's got all this Ghostbusters paraphernalia in it, and Annie Potts's secretary, Janine, is the one who's been with him for a while, and was running his house and helping him pay the bills and stuff while he worked on his scientific stuff. She makes an appearance in the film. And they discover that there is a ghostly thing. The town was created by the guy who created the tower in the original Ghostbusters. That was the portal to the other dimension to bring Gozer in. And they discover that after the Ghostbusters beat Gozer, that Gozer went back into hibernation here at this Oklahoma town, and now he's coming back out. They are coming back out. So McKenna, Phoebe and Trevor and Lucky and Podcast and Paul Rudd and Callie also, well, not Paul Rudd, but the kids, Trevor, Phoebe, Lucky, and Podcast, they all use the Ghostbusters equipment and discover that ghosts are coming back, and they create their own little Ghostbusters thing to try to stop what's going on. Now, they do some research and they understand what's happening and why Harold Ramis's Egon acted the way he did. And they try to contact the original Ghostbusters, and Phoebe is able to contact Dan Aykroyd's Ray Stantz, who tells him that Egon is not welcome, and that he left the Ghostbusters when things were lean and took all their stuff, so effectively destroying the Ghostbusters. And years later, he was calling Ray to say, there's something big coming on down here in Oklahoma. You got to help me. And Ray ignored him because he didn't believe him because of everything that happened. And so Phoebe ends up telling them what's going on. And then they decide that they have to trap Gozer because they start to possess Callie and Paul Rudd's characters as the two dogs, like they did Sigourney Weaver and Rick Moranis in the original movie. And so they have to stop them. So they become the de facto new Ghostbusters, trying to stop in this Oklahoma town. And it also brings back the original Ghostbusters come back. Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson all show up at the end to help fight Gozer. The film is it's amazing. The cast is wonderful. You even get a quick cameo from Sigourney Weaver in one of the funniest mid-credit sequences you're ever going to see. And it's just such a great sequel. It is so good, so entertaining, so rewatchable. I've watched it 4 or 5 times since I watched it last year, and it just is eminently rewatchable. The characters are all great characters. They all have their moments. None of them are too. They start off. A couple of them start off as a little overwhelming, but they become much better. And it's just such a great film, and it's also a really good homage to Harold Ramis's Egon Spengler. Jason Reitman, who is Ivan Reitman's son, directed it, and it was the last movie Ivan Reitman produced before he passed away also. So it's such an amazing movie, so great, so eminently rewatchable. And if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Ghostbusters Afterlife is number 21. Again, I probably would have moved it up higher, but I got a lot of other stuff I got to cover. Number 20 is Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers Extended Edition. That's the middle movie in the Lord of the Rings. It's my wife's favorite Lord of the Rings movie. I like it a lot too. And it continues a storyline, introduces new characters, and continues the gorgeousness of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. And I've already talked a lot about it in Return of the King back in the earlier in the episode. So we're going to move on from there. Number 19 is the second movie that I watched during that week last year where my family was away, and I was just watching movies just to get caught up on stuff I hadn't seen. Moon was another one, which I talked about in a different episode. And The Phantom, I also saw that for the first time, which I talked about in the last episode also, is Chris Nolan's sci-fi epic Interstellar. Now, Chris Nolan, I have always felt seemed to be a little overloved by people. He's considered to be a genius. His Batman trilogy, all 3 movies are in my list. So it's a pretty good trilogy. I did not put Inception in here because I like the movie, but it's still a little out there for me. I haven't seen Dunkirk yet. I haven't seen Insomnia, which I kind of want to see. Memento is so good. That was on my list also. So Chris Nolan, and then I haven't seen The Prestige. I should see that also. But Chris Nolan is just, I feel like I shouldn't like him because everybody, like all the film geeks and stuff like that, who I don't really appreciate a lot of their attitudes, they seem to absolutely love him to pieces. But when he releases a film like Interstellar, which is number 19 on my list, ahead of The Two Towers and Ghostbusters Afterlife and all that stuff, it's must be doing something right. And one of the things they did right was Hans Zimmer's music is outstanding, used a bunch in TikTok stuff now, and it is amazing. And the storyline itself, I've never really been the biggest Matthew McConaughey fan, but he is absolutely brilliant in this movie. He's very subdued, normal. Michael Caine, Anne Hathaway, John Lithgow's in it. Timothy Chalamet's in it. It was one of his early films that a lot of people don't know he was in it. And this part, and then Matt Damon makes the appearance. I think that bit with Matt Damon takes a little bit too long and makes the movie, stop for just a little bit and slow down a little bit. But it also has damn it, what is her name? Topher Grace is in it. And then Casey Affleck is in it also. And Jessica Chastain. Jessica Chastain is in it also. Matt Damon's role in the film is to give sort of a bad guy role in it, even though he doesn't pop up till near the end of the movie. And then Casey Affleck's character sort of becomes a bad guy a little bit too, but not in a typical bad guy fashion. Matt Damon's bad guy is, again, not your typical bad guy. And you can understand maybe the reason why he's doing it, but it's sort of when the Matt Damon scene comes up, it's the only part of the film that slows down for me, but it's still very good. And it gives the Interstellar, which has been sort of a slow burn sort of film with periods of little bits of action here and there, and much needed boost of action right before the incredibly mind-blowing finale, which everybody doesn't quite understand. But if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense, and they sort of spell it out for you. And it just is a way to make the film come full circle, and it works out really well. And I enjoy it immensely. The science is real. according to lots of scientists, they say their version of the black hole is very accurate, and the stuff that happens accurate. The planet where what 7 years goes by on Earth for every minute or every hour they spend on the planet, which is an entire water planet, which is an incredible sequence because it's a water planet. You don't see that in movies nowadays. And this whole sequence is extraordinarily exciting. And we discovered that 23 Earth years had passed while they were on the surface. And that's insane, and it blows your mind there. And then they go to the all ice planet where Matt Damon is. And that's like, wow, this is something that we've seen a little bit of, like with Hoth, but it actually feels like it is a different planet that's not connected to Earth. And then later on, we find out the third planet. We have a brief view of the third planet they're supposed to visit, where Anne Hathaway is. And it's like, this is another really cool sort of planet that I wish we could have spent a little bit more time on instead of the whole Matt Damon stuff. I mean, they could have cut some of the Matt Damon, not all of it, because they needed to have some of the Matt Damon stuff in there for specific reasons. And then the bit at the end with the black hole is outstanding. Also, it is a mind-blowing film. The effects are absolutely outstanding. As I said, the settings that are realistic, the wormhole, the apocalyptic Earth with, what could very well possibly be a look at our future with plants and vegetables and stuff like that dying due to, environmental concerns, which is absolutely something that could happen, and how people are trying to, whitewash things. It is such a current film, but at the same time, it's a futuristic science fiction aspected film as well. Interstellar's number 19. Hans Zimmer's score absolutely should have won the Oscar, and it is now is absolutely gorgeous. And the settings on the different planets, the science, and the acting, Hathaway and McConaughey are great. Michael Caine as well. Jessica Chastain, Timothée Chalamet. Casey Affleck I got kind of sick of after a while, but that's besides the point. So good. Such a great movie. Interstellar number 19. Number 18 is another one of the funniest movies of all time. Mel Brooks pops up again. Blazing Saddles. Yes, it's a film that cannot be made today because of the racist nature of it, but it is absolutely one of the funniest films of all time. Cleavon Little, Gene Wilder, Madeline Stowe, Hedy Lamarr, all stuff like that. Just the straight up just insanity that is Blazing Saddles that Mel Brooks brought to the screen. Dom DeLuise is in there as well as a cameo at the end. Richard Pryor co-wrote the screenplay and was supposed to star in it, but that's when he got into his drug thing where he burned himself up from freebasing. So he wasn't able to act in it. So they got Cleavon Little, who I think who did a better job. I think if Richard Pryor was in the role, it wouldn't be quite the same movie. Cleavon Little, everyone knows Richard Pryor at that time was sort of this crazy sort of, it was hilarious, but he was this crazy kind of comedian. Cleavon Little, meanwhile, was sort of this actor who was theoretically trained and was on Broadway and stuff like that, and is very subdued and not Richard Pryor-esque, and an actor not a lot of people knew about. So it's a good flashy role for him. It shows his comedic chops, but also I think if Richard Pryor was in it, it just would be a little not be the same movie. But Blazing Saddles is so good. Gene Wilder's character is so good. Madeline Stowe's character is so good. Mel Brooks is an amazing guy. It's a joke on Westerns and has the meta ending at the end where it's supposed to take place in the Old West. And then the finale takes place on the grounds of the Warner Brothers studio. And one of the funniest bits of the movie where the cast of the movie Blazing Saddles ends up wrecking other movie sets and the cafeteria as they get into a big fight sequence, and just the finale taking place in a movie theater. It's just, and the whole method, and then going back to like they were in the past, it is just one of the most bizarre endings, but for this movie it absolutely works. And yes, it is a movie that probably could not be done today due to the racial nature of things, but Blazing Saddles is number 18. Number 17 is Mel Brooks is a doubleheader here. I still think this is my favorite Mel Brooks movie of all time. It's Spaceballs. It's a parody of Star Wars. Mel Brooks' Star Wars for the most part. You cannot get any better than that. Bill Pullman in one of his earliest roles is fantastic in it. Joan Rivers, John Candy's in it. Mel makes an appearance in this. Mel's in Blazing Saddles also a couple times. But he's in it as well with playing two roles, Yogurt and Emperor Scrooge. Rick Moranis as Dark Helmet is great. And Daphne Zuniga as the Princess Vespa character, who's like Princess Leia, but more insane. Dick Van Patten is in it as well, and there's lots of other John Hurt from Alien. They parody the Alien stuff at the end. It's great. John Candy, as I said, his Mog, his barf is so amazing character. Rick Moranis is great as the main bad guy, Dark Helmet, doing his parody of Darth Vader, but as Rick Moranis, which is outstanding. Bill Pullman as a straight man, but he's got his moments of comedy in it. Again, you get a little bit of meta stuff during their Schwartz saber battle. Rick Moranis' character kills the lighting guy or the sound guy, which is amazing for the film. Parodies of other sci-fi roles, jokes about stunt doubles, and just a absolutely hilarious movie. My favorite Mel Brooks movie, Spaceballs, number 17. Number 16, we find the original 1984 Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters Afterlife is still, I really, really, really love that. But the original Ghostbusters is still the ceiling for that. It's very close, but the Ghostbusters original movie is still one of the best comedies of all time, one of the best scripts of all time, one of the best casts of all time. Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, Annie Potts, Rick Moranis, Sigourney Weaver, William Atherton, Giant Marshmallow Man, the typical, going into business sort of thing. They start a ghost busting company. They start off not being very good, but then they have their first case and their second case, then they become celebrities. And then they have to save the city of New York from an apocalypse. So you get Danny Aykroyd, who's got connections to the supernatural world and is very technical stuff, throwing all kinds of jargon out there. Then you've got Harold Ramis's comedic side to it, adding it, and Bill Murray's just his straight up, just let Bill say whatever he wants to do. Even giving Ernie Hudson one of the best lines of the movie was great, because I think they treat him a little badly, and I wish they would have done a little bit better job with Ernie. And supposedly he's going to have a bigger role in the Afterlife sequel, which is coming out later this year, which I'm so excited for. So again, as I said, this list is fluid. So when Afterlife 2, which is now called Firehouse, I believe, Ghostbusters Firehouse, when that comes out, if it's as good as Afterlife, it could be up here on the list as well. So I can't wait to see that. It's in December, so I'm going to see that. I can't wait to see that as long as it stays that way. I think they're done filming. I think Paul Rudd's filming something else right now. But yes, the original Ghostbusters, not much you can say about that. Just a phenomenal cast. Everyone knows this movie. Everyone loves this movie, as you should. It is a spectacular film. Ghostbusters number 16. Number 15 is probably my favorite MCU movie, mainly due to the fact that it is also very meta as well. Spider-Man No Way Home, the third in the Spider-Man saga with Tom Holland and Zendaya. This one brings in, spoiler alert, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man from the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man, and the Andrew, what's his face? Andrew, you know who I'm talking about, the Andrew one from the Amazing Spider-Man saga as well. I'm sorry, Andrew, I can't remember your name right now. But to have them brought in and then bringing their old villains, including, Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin and the Jamie Foxx Electro and the Sandman. And then you throw Doctor Strange in there, and you throw the still gorgeous Marissa Tomei in there, and Jon Favreau as well. And I find this film a lot better than the other Tom Holland ones, even though I like Far From Home. No Way Home is still my absolute favorite one. It is the one movie where Tom Holland has finally become the Spider-Man that I've wanted by the end of the film. And he has a heartbreaking decision to make. His chemistry with Zendaya is smoking hot, and just the storyline, the multiverse stuff, cementing it in the MCU proper, just adds an incredible aspect to all this. Spider-Man No Way Home, number 15 on my list. Number 14 is probably one of Steven Spielberg's best films he ever made. One of my absolute favorites, one that I can consistently watch over and over again, was at the time 1993. Also, another big one, 1993. You know where I'm coming with this one. 30th anniversary this year, and was a huge leap in CGI and effects. Is Jurassic Park, obviously written based on the Michael Crichton novel, which is okay, but is not as good as the movie. And thankfully, Michael Crichton decided to make some changes. So for the movie, he changed some stuff up because he wrote the screenplay for the movie, I think, with David Goyer as well. But he was up there and helped write the screenplay for that. Jurassic Park is Sam Neill, Jeff Goldblum, Richard Attenborough. I forget the actress. She was just in Twin Peaks also. Regardless, Wayne Knight, Samuel L. Jackson, Laura Dern, thank you. So just a great film, CGI, outstanding. And the storyline's pretty cool too. Someone's found a way to clone dinosaurs, so they're going to create a zoo full of dinosaurs. But of course, something goes wrong. The dinosaurs get loose and run havoc across the land, and the people have to survive. It's Jaws, but with dinosaurs for the most part. But it's just brilliant. It's fantastic. It's one of my favorite Spielberg movies. It's one I could watch over and over again. Jurassic Park is number 14. Number 13 finds, in my opinion, the funniest movie of all time. It's a movie I've seen a bunch of times, and I laugh every single time, even though I know all the jokes. I know all stuff's going to happen. It is the epitome of what a parody movie should be. It is the highest point of a parody movie. It's Airplane, the original Airplane. One of the funniest movies of all time. The Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams did this. Cast of millions: Lloyd Bridges, Julie Haggerty, Robert Hayes, Robert Stack, Peter, what is his face from Mission Impossible? I forget his name. Leslie Nielsen, and just a cast of thousands. Joke every minute. My favorite scene in the whole movie is when Robert Stack's character comes in and beats the hell out of all the religious zealots who are trying to sell him stuff. It's actually hilarious. Steven Stucker, just a amazing, funny, absolutely ludicrous film, but so funny. The funniest movie on this list, the funniest movie of all time, is Airplane, number 13. Number 12. Gonna get a lot of shit for this. Already know it. Number 12 is Star Wars. The original Star Wars, 1977, the one that started the whole big Star Wars phenomenon, is at number 12 on my list. Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Peter Mayhew, Kenny Baker, Anthony Daniels, James Earl Jones, David Prowse, Peter Cushing, Alec Guinness. Those are the main actors. I don't think there's anybody else I'm really thinking that those are the main ones you think about. It's what started it all. Everyone knows this movie. A lot of people consider it the best of the Star Wars saga. Not so many. The next movie, they'll probably think more. Number 12. Yes. Star Wars is number 12 on my list. It's very good. It's number 12. And I absolutely love it. It's a film I can watch all the time. It's one of my faves. But I just like 11 other movies a little bit more than that. I'm not going to say much more about because you all know what Star Wars is. Go ahead, drop the shit in the comments. I know number 12, Star Wars. You're going to not like this one either. Number 11 is The Empire Strikes Back. Yes, I like Return of the Jedi better than those two. And we'll tell you where Return of the Jedi pops up here in a few minutes. But Empire Strikes Back is considered to be the best of the original trilogy, as it should be. You know, people like when the good guys don't win. In this case, the good guys don't win at all in this film, and it ends on a somber cliffhanger, but with a sprig of new hope in there. It introduces, same cast from the Star Wars pops up, but you also get an added bonus of you get the first appearance of Boba Fett that wasn't he was in the Christmas special, but the actual first appearance in the movie. Boba Fett's in here. You get Billy D. Williams' Lando Calrissian pops up. You get Frank Oz's Yoda makes an appearance in here as well. Some more iconic characters show up there. Again, you all know Empire Strikes Back. I'm not going to really go into much more detail about it. But yes, I like it better than Star Wars, but Return of the Jedi is still my favorite, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Empire Strikes Back is number 11. So yes, how can these two movies not be in your top 10, Dylan? Again, my list is fluid. Could they move up eventually? Sure. But these 10 movies are my favorite movies of all time. These are the ones that I absolutely love. These are the ones that I always go back to over and over and over again. As I said, it's fluid. I could probably definitely move a lot of these around and maybe move some into the top 10. But right now, these are my 10 favorite movies of all time. And here we are an hour and a half into the second part of the epilogue and the top 10 finally. So let's see if I can cruise this out in the next half hour, because it's also getting close to dinner time and I got a grill today. So my wife's probably thinking, what the hell's going on? But here we go. Number 10, Before Sunset. I talked about Before Sunrise, talked about Before Midnight. Before Sunset is the middle movie in the trilogy. It's my favorite just because in Before Sunrise, I found Ethan Hawke's character a little bit annoying. He still was great. He's better than he was in Reality Bites, but I found him a little annoying. And that was really about the only reason why it was up there at number 28. And Before Midnight is a whole other ball of wax because I love these characters together, and the fact that they were on the verge of breaking up, I think that's what killed me on that one. But Before Sunset is the one that really cemented this relationship. Filmed 11 years after Before Sunrise and released 11 years later. And that's exactly how Richard Linklater, who was a director, I couldn't remember it the last time I said it, and Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy wanted it. In fact, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy wrote, I think, or is that the third one? I think they were credited on the third one, that they helped write that one, but I'm sure they probably helped write this one as well. This one takes place 11 years after Before Sunrise, where Ethan Hawke's character is now a world famous author, and he's finishing up a European tour of his new book tour in Paris. The book he's written is about his one night with Julie Delpy's character in Before Sunrise, and it's also a way to sort of send out a beacon to see if she's in Paris, because that's where he wanted to end his book tour, because he knows she's from Paris. And sure enough, she shows up at the book signing. And we learn, and they meet up after the book signing, they meet up, and we learn early on in the movie that Ethan Hawke returned to Vienna, but Julie Delpy didn't. And the reason why she didn't is because her grandmother died. And since they didn't have phone numbers and stuff like that, and they didn't call, she couldn't tell him that she wasn't going to be there. So that kind of screwed up Ethan Hawke's character a little bit and turned him into how he is now, where he's sort of defeated. He ended up marrying someone that he loved, but not as much as he loved Julie Delpy's character. He has a kid, he has a son, but his marriage with his wife is kind of on the rocks a little bit, because he can't stop thinking about Julie Delpy's character. But Julie Delpy shows up. She's not married, but she's dating a news photographer who goes around the world photographing like war things. She works for an environmental agency, stuff like that. So they have only and it's the film is done in real time. They only have like an hour and a half to chit chat before he has to leave on a flight back to America. So they walk through Paris, and it takes a little while for them, again, like in the first film, to get back into rhythm. But once they get back into rhythm, you start getting a little sort of a taste of Before Sunrise stuff. But the difference this time is that in Before Sunrise, they're younger, they're trying to impress each other, they haven't had quite the life experiences that they've had before. But now 11 years later, life has been kind of hard for both of them, and now they're both kind of defeated, sort of, and they're trying to just releasing. They haven't had a chance to sort of release all this pent-up emotion that's been inside them until the two of them start chit-chatting. And that's why I like this movie so much, because you get to see a much different side of these characters than you did in Before Sunrise. Before Sunrise, they are the gorgeous, in love, the flirtatious period of an early relationship where everything is glorious and romantic and like that. The middle movie, this one is one where you start digging deeper and you start learning more about the relationship, where early on, everything's so great. It's what a friend of mine, right? It's all dick and lies. That's what it was, something like that. But sex and lies, we'll say in this case. But this case now, you've been together, you start seeing the darker sides, the more emotional sides of the characters. And Ethan Hawke is such a different character than he was in Before Sunrise, and I absolutely love his character in Before Sunset. Now, Julie Delpy's character, I loved her character in Before Sunrise. Her character got a little grating in Before Sunset, but not as bad as she was, as bad as Ethan Hawke's character was in Before Sunrise. But I still like it, but I still think Ethan Hawke is the one that had the most character development in this saga, even though we do see what's great about Julie Delpy's role in this also, that she starts off being like her normal self, but then she starts breaking down. And that's where I really end up really loving Julie Delpy's performance, because she's starting off like, oh, everything's great, everything's good, things are happening then. And then as they're starting to talk more and more, and he's revealing all of his emotional distress, stuff like that, and she's just sucking it up. Eventually it just gives me too much for her, and she has to vent herself. And her venting just absolutely reduces her character down and brings a lot more gravitas to the role, and shows that this character is human just like everybody else and is outstanding. Before Sunset is gorgeous, shot in Paris during the summer. Two great characters with great chemistry, just a wonderful set pieces, great storyline. And maybe when I watched it in my 30s, I became more I agreed along with it along those lines, that I felt a lot of the same thing. That's why it's this high up on my list. But still, even now in my 40s and 50s, when I've watched it, I still like this one better than the other ones. Number 9 is another one of my favorite movies, and one of my wife's favorite movies, and also my kids love this one also. It's Clue, 1985. Cast of millions. You cannot beat this cast. A film about the game Clue. Good movie. Hell yes, it's a good movie. It's a freaking outstanding movie. And just listen to this cast: Madeline Kahn, Tim Curry, Leslie Ann Warren, Colleen Camp, Michael McKean, Christopher Lloyd, Eileen Brennan, Martin Mull, Jane Wiedlin, Lee Ving, Kelly Nakahara, Jeffrey Kramer, Bill Henderson. Just a outstanding, hilarious comedy with lots of physical comedy and lots of rat-a-tat jokes and asides and sarcasm and just actions, and just about murder. A comedy about murder based on a board game is so good. It does not deserve to be this good, but it is so good. And Tim Curry absolutely gives one of the performances of his life as the butler. And the fact that the little trick about this movie also is it had 3 separate endings, that when it was released in movie theaters, you didn't know which ending you were going to get, which is kind of a unique idea, but in the end, it fell flat and made Clue not become a big hit, but it became a bigger hit, a cult classic, as it was released on cable and DVD and stuff like that. Clue is amazing, phenomenal, hilarious, great cast, great physical comedy, wonderful performances by everybody, but particularly Tim Curry, Mike, and then the guy who played Venus Flytrap is not Venus Flytrap, Johnny. I forget his name right now, but I'm not gonna bring it up right now. He was the head of the class, stuff like that. I can't remember. Howard Hessman. Howard Hessman's in it also, but it is a outstanding film, hilarious, just wonderful. It would go good. Clue and Noises Off would be a good double feature to show, because they both have a similar sort of feel with the physical comedy and the rat-a-tat action and stuff like that. Clue is number 9. Number 8, also, actually, it's doing its 40th anniversary this year. Return of the Jedi is my number 8 film. Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie. I know why people hate it. They hate it because of the Ewoks. They hate it because Darth Vader sort of seems like he becomes neutered, but that's kind of the whole point of this. The movie starts off with an amazing action sequence where they have to free Han Solo and Jabba the Hutt from Jabba the Hutt's captives. We get to see Jabba the Hutt stuff, and then we see Luke going back to Yoda to learn his training. But Yoda says your training is done. But then we have to get the payoff of the Darth Vader saying, "Luke, I am your father." He has to find out that's true. But then we learn he has a sister, and we learn that Princess Leia is his sister. So that in turn makes this even great. Then they go. There's another Death Star. They figure out a way to defeat it, so they have to go and they have to destroy it. Luke comes back and joins his friends. They go down to the Forest Moon of Endor to destroy the shield around the Death Star, but the Emperor comes to town. He's faked out the rebels. He's got the fully functional Death Star, and he's trying to try to seduce Luke Skywalker to the dark side, knowing that his father, Darth Vader, will be able to bring him up to him. And there's going to be an amazing lightsaber battle. There's speeder bikes, which was always the big deal in 1983, was outstanding. The scene between Luke and Leia where they reveal the relationship together is amazing. Han Solo, again, people feel like he got neutered also, but I don't agree with that. The Ewoks are fucking killer bears, man. They kill you to eat you. They don't kill you right away. They knock you down with their spears and their rocks and stuff like that. They're not there to kill you, because as soon as you get knocked down and you're weakened, they swarm on you, they tear off your stuff, and they eat the shit out of you. They're fucking bears. They're little bears. And yes, how can the Empire, who's this powerful technological thing, lose to a bunch of cuddly little bears? They're fucking bears. They like to eat people. End of story. It's spelled out in the movie. Luke and Chewie and Han are held over spits to get cooked for their meal. Princess Leia is wearing a dress that she didn't have on or didn't have with her when she landed on Endor. Where'd they get the fucking dress? Probably from a woman they killed and ate. Return of the Jedi is an outstanding movie. It is, in my opinion, the best Star Wars movie. The sequence where Lando is leading the Millennium Falcon into battle towards the Death Star, and it's from the view of his cockpit, and you see all the TIE fighters coming at him, is outstanding. Return of the Jedi is number 8. Number 7 is Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, the extended edition, obviously. This is the one that is my favorite, because it's the one where the Fellowship is all together for the majority of the film, and I like having them all together and just get the storyline starting, but I like when they're all together working. And I hear my wife getting dinner started and ready, so I need to get my ass moving here to finish things up. So number 7 is Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, my favorite of the Lord of the Rings sagas, because I love the cast working together. Number 6 is Jojo Rabbit, Taika Waititi's amazing Nazi comedy about a young boy who wants to be a Nazi but doesn't have the guts to be a Nazi, but discovers that his mother, played by Scarlett Johansson, has been hiding a Jewish girl in their house. And at first he's upset by it, but then he slowly begins to kind of like the idea of her being around. You also have, oh God, I forget his name, and who does another phenomenal role in this as well. Just killing me that I can never remember his name. Sam Rockwell does a fantastic job as well. Rebel Wilson's in it. Archie Yates. Roman Griffin Davis plays the main character. Taika Waititi plays Adolf Hitler, who is the main character's invisible imaginary friend. And Sam Rockwell does an amazing job as the captain, who is like the babysitter for JoJo. But it's a hilarious comedy, but also is a incredibly dramatic film, and has moments of high drama, high comedy, and it also has to remind you that this is indeed a war film, and that war is hell. And the film is, even though it's light-hearted for the most part, with some dramatic beats in it, you still have to remember this is a war film. And the finale, where the Allies are invading this German village to get rid of the Nazis, is a sign of that, particularly one of the last sequences. But it is a phenomenal movie. It is another movie that I can watch all the time, whenever. It is funny. It is heartbreaking. It is dramatic. It's hilarious. It makes you think. It's a great World War II movie. it's Jojo Rabbit. Number 5 is my favorite Tim Burton movie of all time. Of all the stuff that he's done, my favorite is his little-known one called Big Fish. Nominated for a bunch of Oscars, won some Golden Globes with it, but didn't really win anything for the Oscars. Absolutely deserved to. It's just a basic story about Ewan McGregor, and I got to get the cast in this one because this is my favorite Tim Burton movie, and I have to. Again, I don't really have a lot of time to talk about because I can sound like my wife is really kind of pushing to get dinner started here, and I need to grill for them. Ewan McGregor and Albert Finney play the same character. Ewan McGregor plays a young version of Edward Bloom. Albert Finney is the older version of it. Helena Bonham Carter plays 2 roles in it. Billy Crudup is the main character who plays the son of Edward Bloom. His wife is played by Marion Cotillard, who's pregnant with their first child. Matthew McGorry plays the giant. My Aunt Jessica Lange plays his mother, Will Bloom's mother, and the wife of Albert Finney's Edward Bloom. Alison Lohman plays the young Sandra Bloom. Danny DeVito pops up in there as well. Steve Buscemi pops up in there. Miley Cyrus. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay. London Wainwright, didn't know that either. Missy Pyle is in it too. Robert Guillaume, Deep Roy. So that's just the cast, but it's a amazing story, and that it's Edward Bloom is a tall tale talker. He creates stories about his life that makes him bigger than life. And his son is starting to get sick of hearing the same stories over and over again. His father's very charismatic, but he hates hearing the stories over and over again. But we hear the stories that he tells, and we see them reenacted by Ewan McGregor and Alison Lohman and all that. And it's just a history of a family, a father and a son trying to find a common bond. His dad is dying of cancer. He's about ready to become a father, and he's trying to reconcile his relationship with his father that hasn't been very good lately. And it's this whole thing about him making up all these stories. But then as Will starts investigating his father's life, he discovers that not everything is an exaggeration, but there are some aspects of it too. It's a great movie. I wish I could talk about it more. That's why it's number 5 on my list. It's my favorite Tim Burton movie. This one can get you also in the feels also. It gets you tears up a little bit also. And it is such a great movie. Ewan McGregor's fantastic. It has that Tim Burton quality to it in certain aspects of the movie, but in others, it's a completely different style movie. So you got to love it for that. Number 4 is a film probably none of you have heard of before, but you should have, based on a true story. It's an Australian film. Sam Neill and Patrick Warburton are the main stars of that. The rest is filled with a cast of Australian actors. It was the most successful Australian film a long time ago. Came out in the magical year of 1999. It's called The Dish, and basically it's based on a true story about a radio telescope in Australia and about the group of locals who run it, and the small town in Australia that it's set in. The Dish is one of these films that there is no bad guy. The cast is great. It is a fun family film. It might seem a little boring, but it keeps the action up. It's hilarious and based on a true story. And I wish I could talk more about it also, but I can't because she's pushing to get dinner ready, I guess. So I want to get moving here. But The Dish is so good. If you haven't seen it, you definitely need to go see it, particularly around the time of the moon landing, because it's set during that period of time. Patrick Warburton is great in that, and watching him in this role makes me wish that he could have played Superman at some point, because he was perfectly cast as a Clark Kent type, but he could also see him as a Superman type. But the film is a wonderful film. It's funny. It's heartwarming. There's no villains. It's just a group of people who all like each other. Well, there's some antagonism between people, but that's part of the movie. But it's nothing that's hatred, and it's developing relationships and stuff like that. It is a great film, absolutely hilarious. The version of the national anthem you have to hear is the biggest joke of the film. Is outstanding. The Dish is number 4. Number 3 is my favorite Christmas movie now of all time. Christmas Story used to be that way, but I love this animated film. I still watch it other times when it's not Christmas time. This is a Netflix original, so this is one of the highest streaming film that never made it to the theaters. It's Klaus. It's a story about how Santa Claus was created, and the story follows a postman's son who is a spoiled brat, and the father is tired of postmaster general, I should say, is tired of his son just sort of being a privileged person, so he sends him to a Arctic hellhole to turn the post office around there. Now, this Arctic hellhole is a place where there's two warring factions of families who have turned the whole city into their own personal war zone to each other. Everybody hates each other. It's dark all the time. It's cold. It's creepy. And it's his job. He has a year to create a post office and send out like 5,000 letters, or else he's going to get cut off from the privileged life and he's going to have to learn to live on his own. So he has to go and try to do that. And eventually he hooks up with a mysterious woodsman voiced by J.K. Simmons, who is a toy maker. And eventually the two of them come up with a scheme to get kids to write letters to this Mr. Klaus, and they'll deliver presents to him from the toys that the toy maker made. And you get all the aspects of the Santa myths in there: the reindeer, the flying sleigh coming down the chimney, the coal in the stockings. But it's told from a different perspective, and the artwork is outstanding. The characters are amazing. I love this film. One of my favorite films, my favorite Christmas movie of all time. Nowadays, Klaus is number 3. Definitely, it's on Netflix right now. Go see it right now. Don't wait till Christmas. Go see it right now. Then you'll see it again at Christmas when it's particularly needed to see it. But it is an outstanding movie. Love it so much. And it also tears you up a little bit also. Number 2, Robert Zemeckis Strikes Again, Back to the Future, the original one. Can't beat the original. Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Crispin Glover, Thomas Wilson, James Tolkien. Can't beat it. The original saga about a slacker kid in 85 who goes back in time accidentally after he sees his professor buddy who created the time machine get shot and killed. Ends up ruining the meeting of his parents, and gets his mother to fall in love with him by accident, and then has to figure out a way to get his parents to fall back in love, or he'll be erased from existence. He gets the help from 1955's Doc, and you know the rest of the story. It's one of Zemeckis' classic. It is probably his most classic film. Forrest Gump won him the Oscar, yes, but this is probably Zemeckis' best film, and it's number 2 on my list. And finally, number 1, which is going to be totally unexpected, and you're all going to scream your heads off about what am I doing and what am I saying, is a more recent film based on a novel by something Weir. Science fiction, no villain, basically kind of castaway, but on another planet, but also you have a supporting group of amazing actors. Ridley Scott directed. The Martian is my number 1 favorite film of all time. Is a film that I have watched so many times over the last couple years that whenever I'm bored, whenever I want to watch a movie, The Martian is always the one I kind of pull out to watch, because there is no villain. It is a funny film, but it's also shot very well. Special effects are great. Has an amazing cast: Matt Damon, Jessica Chastain, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Kate Mara, Christina Wig, Sebastian Stan, Michael Pena, Mackenzie Davis, Sean Bean, Jeff Daniels, Donald Glover, Benedict Wong, Eddie Ko, Chen Shu. Those are the main ones. But Ridley Scott directs the hell out of it. Matt Damon's character is freaking hilarious. The cast and crew, you have, it shows that science working together like an Apollo 13 to try to save their guy who's trapped on Mars all alone with no way of getting back for at least 5 years, not enough food to survive that long. So he's got to figure out a way to survive, and has breakthroughs, and has bad stuff happen, but he keeps his spirit up. And meanwhile, the people on Earth, NASA is trying to figure out a way to do it. They have their own setbacks and the breakthrough, stuff like that. The crew is also trying to recover from the fact that they accidentally left somebody who they thought was dead back on the planet, and there's nothing they can do about it either because they're on their way back home. They can't just turn the ship around, and they don't have enough time to survive. So it is a ticking clock film, but over a span of about 5-year window. It is shot amazingly well. It is freaking hilarious. It is wonderful. It is an amazing film. I love watching it over and over again. I do not get tired of watching it over and over again. And I know this sounds weird, but that is my number one movie of all time, is The Martian. I wish I could talk about all these a little bit more, but I'm getting close to the 2-hour mark, which means that compared to this, with my previous one, would have been a 3, almost 4-hour long show. So I gotta wrap this up now. So thank you. I'll be back in about 5 hours to do another show here. But thank you for watching. Those are my films. As I said, fluid list. Things could change. One particularly is Killers of the Flower Moon, which is Martin Scorsese's new film coming out in October. Looks like it might be making the list because I just finished reading the book. And if it says anything like the book, I'm going to love the movie as well. And, Barbie could pop up there. Oppenheimer, who knows? So that was my list. Thank you. And come back in 5 hours and watch the 501st episode of Dylan Knows. Thank you for watching and sticking with me. I appreciate it. You can send your hate now in the comments below. Love you. Martian number 1.